Ready to play, that's the front page of the Catalan newspaper Sport. Optimistic stuff regarding the return of La Liga. Sid Lowe with us from Madrid. Sid, what's the plan?
Well, the plan is a series of steps to lead us to a position in which clubs can start training in the next week or just over that. And the plan to start with, at least, is that on Monday and Tuesday of next week there will be a series of inspections at training grounds to make sure that they comply with La Liga's protocol on things like disinfecting, in things like access, in terms of the way that kits are laid out, in terms of the way that the players have access to the training grounds and how those entry points are staggered so that there's not too much coincidence of players with each other. Then after that, the hope is they'd spend a couple of days doing tests to get a very clear sense of what position they're in, what players have kind of what level of immunity, which players maybe still have the virus if indeed they ever had. And then from there the hope would be that they could start individual training sessions, and it's important to stress that, individual training sessions at the club's training camps on either the 8th or the 11th. In other words, just before the weekend or just after the weekend. Now, the reason why this is different to those previous dates that have been set, to those previous discussions of when things might happen, is that for the first time now, we're in a situation in which La Liga's protocol more or less fits with what the government is planning to do. The government's been talking about a reduction of the lockdown in terms of relaxing some of the rules, allowing people out. For example, this weekend, for the first time, Spaniards will be allowed out of their homes to do exercise, and that has explicitly talked about the position of professional athletes. And so for the first time, we're now in a position where what the government are saying and what big sporting institutions, in particular in this case La Liga, are saying is broadly in step. And so as of next week, assuming there's no problems in the next 3 or 4 days, this should start to get moving.
Meanwhile, we're hearing both sides, aren't we? The arguments when it comes to players returning. This is what even Rakitic say, front page of Marca here. The Barcelona midfielder saying, I'll take the risk of playing. He'll be the same as any worker. Meanwhile, Valencia's Gabriel Paulista coming out on Instagram and saying, we will play when no one does it out of fear and when we have complete guarantees that there are no risks. Both sets of real opinions there, Sid.
Yeah, and I think what this does, this contrasting of these two opinions from Gabriel and from Ivan Rakitic, is it tells you that footballers do not all feel the same way. You know, I think we sometimes forget this. We tend to talk about footballers and what footballers want, but you're talking in the First Division. Every single club has 25 players. There's 20 clubs in the First Division. That's a lot of footballers, and they don't all feel the same way. In particular, of course, the contexts here are different. Valencia were the club that most hard hit by this. They had a series of players test positive for COVID-19. They were the ones, of course, who went to Milan to play against Atalanta, that had Atalanta play against them at Mestalla behind closed doors. So that sense of, if you like, the kind of the sensibility towards this is different in each case. I also think as well that they're not actually as far apart as it sounds like. I think the question mark would be when Gabriel talks about complete safety, the ability to be absolutely certain that no one will get ill. Well, there's no way of being certain that anybody in any walk of life will get ill. But of course, part of La Liga's protocol is designed to prevent this, because they know that it's one thing to get started, it's one thing to try and get teams back into training, but of course if that process is halted at some stage, if that process falls apart at some stage, then the season won't get completed. So it's not enough just to start, they need to be able to complete it. So some of those guarantees, some of those safety checks that Gabriel wants, I think probably will be put into place.
Sid, it's the first time we've had you on since, for example, France cancelled the league. They won't be playing until September. Germany, though, more optimistic. The Premier League still very much in discussions. In Spain, what's the general vibe about the return of La Liga?
Well, look, it's quite difficult to judge that. I mean, exactly as you've just been showing with Ivan Rakitic and Gabriel, there are different points of view. And immediately after the announcement in France, I think there was a sense here in Spain that, okay, this is coming here soon now. If France are giving up, the chances are Spain will give up. However pugnacious, however determined, however kind of bullish the president of the league, Javier Tebas, is, and he's been incredibly bullish all the way through this. I think most people think that he's been unrealistically bullish, that he's of course doing this out of a desire rather than necessarily reality. But I think the fact that 2 days later, the head of the government, Pedro Sanchez, announced a series of de-escalation processes, a 4-stage plan to come out of lockdown and to go towards what he's describing as a new normality. And the fact that that fit with La Liga's plans, the fact that there was then a task force meeting between the Consejo Superior de Deportes, which is effectively the sports ministry, with the league, with the federation, with the players union, with some clubs, with a whole series of other sporting bodies as well, and that there was an agreement that most of what had been proposed to the government could happen, I think shifted people's mentalities, and I think made people think, okay, actually this could happen. Now, that's not to say that everybody's behind it, that everybody wants it to happen, that everybody believes that this is the right thing to happen. Because of course right now there are far more important elements, but there is a very definite sense that the curve is going in the right direction, that there is the beginning of an opening up on lockdown, and that football can be part of that. Now nobody doubts that when and if football returns, it will do so behind closed doors, that it won't be quite the same thing. But I think most people now believe, actually, at the very least, they're going to try this. They'll have the return to training. If those processes can be fulfilled properly, then I think there is a certain optimism now that La Liga's plans, which is for the competition to start by the middle of June, can actually go ahead.
I know what you're missing, Sid, during all of this is a good old comparison between two players. Let's go for one at Atleti, one at Real Madrid. Talkers Christian Carlson, of course, put out this list, top 10 players under the age of 21. Vinicius Jr. coming in at 4. João Felix, meanwhile, very much at the bottom of that top 10. Is that disparity fair?
Do you see that thing over there, Dan? It's a fence. I'm going to go and sit on it, as I always do. Well, I think, look, whenever you start doing a ranking, it's problematic. But I must admit, I think this probably contradicts what many people in Spain would say, because I think there's been a huge excitement about João Felix. But actually, on this season's performances, I think this is justified. We've not seen enough of João Felix. There's all sorts of question marks about whether that's because of him, because of the structure, because of the kind of manager that Diego Simeone is, because of the lack of freedom that he's had, or the difficulty in adaptation. There are some doubts about Vinicius as well, but those fundamentally, I think, reside in his kind of ability to remain calm in the penalty area, his finishing ability. But he's tremendously exciting. He goes at people, he's relentless, he keeps on playing, he's prepared to run and run again and take people on. And there's no doubt there's been pressure on him. We saw it back in September, I think it was, when he scored and he broke down in tears because the pressure had been on him so much. And I think while there are flaws in his game, I think there's a kind of a raw talent there that's very, very exciting. There's no doubt that João Felix has it as well. But right now, in the immediate future, I think it's legitimate to have Vinicius ahead of João Felix, yeah.
Sid Lowe, thank you very much. Talk Christian Carlson, by the way, joins Gab and Jules on the latest edition of the podcast to defend his top 10. You can download that now. Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.